Role of phagocytic leukocytes. Leukocytes, also known as white blood cells, are the cells in our bloodstream that help us fight off pathogens that enter our bodies and also provide us with an immunity for many pathogens we encounter a second time. There are many different leukocyte types of white blood cell and have many different roles in keeping us healthy. One type of leukocyte that gets involved very early in the process of fighting off a pathogen is called a macrophage. Macrophages are large white blood cells that are able to change their cellular shape to surround an invader and take it in through the process of phagocytosis. This movement of the cell membrane is very similar to the movement of Arambia makes and is quite often referred to as amoeboid motion. Even though we think of blood cells as being within the blood vessels, that is not always true for these macrophages. Because macrophages can easily change their shape by amoeboid movement, they are able to squeeze their way in and out of small blood vessels. Therefore, it is not unusual for a macrophage to first encounter an invader completely outside the bloodstream. When a macrophage does meet a cell, it recognizes whether the cell is a natural part of the body and therefore self, or not part of the body and therefore not self. This recognition is based on the protein molecules that make up part of the surface of all cells and viruses. If the collection of protein of the macrophage encounters is determined to be self, then the cell is left alone. If the determination is not self, the macrophage engulfs the invader by phagocytosis. All phagocytes typically contain many lysosomes.
What are antibodies? Well, antibodies are protein molecules that we produce in response to a specific type of pathogen. If you had a measles infection, for example, you would produce only one type of antibody, another type if you contract a virus that gives you flu symptoms. There are different types of antibodies, and that's because each type has been produced in response to a different pathogen. Each pathogen is made up of either cells with cell membranes, or in this case of a virus, a protein code. The cellular invaders, like bacteria, have proteins that are embedded into the outer surface. In the immune system, these foreign proteins are called antigens. Since we know that non-self proteins trigger an immune response, we also need to consider that non-self proteins are also antigens. Most pathogens have several different antigens on their surface, and therefore may trigger the production of many different types of antibody. Even though each type of antibody is different and is specific for just one type of antigen, antibodies as a group of molecules are amazingly similar to each other. Each antibody is a protein that is Y-shaped. At the end of each of the forks of the Y is a binding site. The binding site is where the antibody attaches itself to an antigen. Because the antigen is a protein on the surface of a pathogen, the antibody does become attached to the pathogen. There are different leukocytes that produce antibodies, and they are all called B lymphocytes. Each of us has many different types of B lymphocytes, and as a general rule, each type of B lymphocyte can produce one type of antibody. The thing is that it only produces one relatively small number of antibodies in comparison to the massive infection that we can